Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sudden Wealth. I do hope you're having a wonderful weekend. If you do enjoy the content, please consider dropping that like and subscribe. The channel is growing very well, so thank you very much to all of you for the amazing support. Now, today I wanted to talk about something a bit more macro, a bit more overall for our future. Let's say, let's say you are like me, you're in your 30s, you have hopefully a long life ahead of you. What to expect from the world, in particular places where you live. Now, the US has been the reserve currency since, well, pretty much the 50s and then the 70s out of the gold standard. And the US has dominated innovation, financial prowess after the 90s. And basically, we tend to look at the US for the Western leadership, if you will, the Western culture moving forward. Now, the West, what we call the West, Europe, US, Australia, New Zealand, etc., those have been the best places to be and to live for the past 250 years. Now, if you actually look at the history of mankind, about every 250 years, the best places to live in the world shift. So, for example, in the 5th century, the best place to live was Baghdad, was not Europe. You had other periods during the Dark Ages in Europe that the best place to live would be around China, so and that part of Asia. So it depends. So the world is not static. It's not like, oh, it's always been like this, it will always be like this. And actually, it's a funny thing because the West and the East have completely different ways to look at certain things. So, for example, when something has been going on for a long time, we in the West tend to think that it's likely to keep the same because it has been like this for so long. But if you actually go to the philosophies in the East, in Asia, they will say exactly because something has not been changed for so long that it's now even more likely to change because it's now time for things to adjust. Very, very interesting and completely opposite philosophies. Which one is right? I mean, I think you can make examples for both things. So usually, like in most things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. But what have we seen in the West in the past, let's say, few decades? And by the way, when I say that maybe the world will shift into the East being more important, I'm not saying this happens like in 1 year, right? Because people say, "Oh, but you said this, and now it's 2025, and none of that has happened." Yeah, no, these things are gradual, right? But they move in a certain direction. But it's not like, it okay, 250 years, chop, and then start the other part. That's not how it works. Like the things are kind of fluid, right? But let's see what happened to the West. High levels of debt get mixed into conflicts, inflation of currency, lowering of living standards, weak leadership. All the 5 elements that you typically see in the fall of an empire or a decay of an empire, if you will, they're all present across the West. And the reason is actually quite simple. You see, this is where democracy we become victims of our own desires. So the problem of democracy in general is that the main concern of a politician is to get elected, and then his second main concern is to get re-elected. So invariably they will not resist in doing things which are short-term good, meaning short-term it helps, it makes it seem that it's helping the countries, but long-term is actually quite damaging. So they cannot resist it. They should, in a perfect world, politicians would sacrifice themselves, if you will, for the better of the country, even if the first 3 or 4 years are terrible, but then the next 20 will be great. But in the world we live in, that's not the case. The politicians will always benefit themselves above anything else. Now, does that mean that a system like China is better? No, no. A system like China is even worse. A system like China, you can never have recessions. You need to do whatever you can to prevent them. Look, just came out in the Financial Times on Friday that the Chinese government is now again supporting the real estate sector as well as propping up the Chinese yuan. I mean, it's so obvious, right? And that system is poised to fail because never in the history of mankind did a top down approach like that has worked for more than 100 years. So I'm willing to bet that China, unlike what all your specialist economists and financial experts tell you, will not be the next big thing. I do believe Asia Pacific as so I'm talking about countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam. I think India. I think those countries will do very well. I think as countries relax certain things in the Middle East, like the UAE, where Dubai is, Saudi Arabia, those countries will play a major role. Why? Because we just seen in Europe how important energy is. They have the cheapest conventional energy on the planet. Conventional means oil and gas. But they also have all the ingredients to make the shift to renewable as cheaply as possible. Why? They can produce hydrogen using extremely cheap natural gas, and their renewables cost very little money because their raw materials are very cheap, number one. Number two, what do they have? A lot of real estate, deserts, space that is worth nothing. In Europe and in the US, but worst in Europe, small continent, every square meter or every square foot costs fortunes. So they are actually poised to outperform if they manage to attract talent from abroad, and you only can do that by relaxing some of your, let's call it, policies, right? Latin America is a big question mark, so is Africa, because of the levels of corruption, which are extremely high, and their love for socialism, which is seen all across Latin America, South America, Central America, and Africa, which basically makes it almost impossible for them to succeed as they should. So what I'm trying to say is, based on the space they have, based on the resources they have, they should do much better. But they don't, because they are tied up in socialism and in high corruption levels all across every layers of society, which is a big unfortunate. But now, what I'm trying to say here is, am I trying to make a big prediction? I would say in the next 50 years, and you know how I feel about long-term predictions. The longer you go, the stupider you risk yourself to be. But in any case, I'll throw something out there. I do think that, and this will become apparent as decades go by, that the best places to live in the world, in terms of economic improvements, etc., will probably be Southeast Asia and the Middle East. That is my gut feeling, and I would say Europe and the US will continue to decay. Why? Because they've trained people that you just print money and things go away. And we are starting to understand that that's not the case. And I always give this example. What do we have now that is better than the 60s? Technology. That's it. Technology is a byproduct of capitalism. It's one of the few things that we still have that are great. But now compare the standard of living of people. In the 60s, one salary, so the man worked and he had a high school diploma, one salary, high school diploma, 4 kids, one house, 2 cars, vacations every year. Good enough. Save money for retirement still. Nowadays, 2 workers, 2 master's degree, maybe 2 kids, small house, maybe one car, and maybe another one being leased out. Maybe their company offers them the car for them to use while they work there. That is the difference in the standard of living. It has dramatically decreased, and the only thing that makes it better for us is technology. Now, is there anything that can change this outlook that I have? Yes. Artificial intelligence is the big unknown to me. I think we're just grasping the surface of the potential of artificial intelligence, for good or bad, by the way. And I'm not sure exactly what it will do for the world, let alone but different regions of the world. I do think its impact will be more transformative than the internet, and maybe it will fuel up another wave for the West to remain the best place to live overall in the world. I don't know, I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't have the knowledge to know all these moving parts. But what I'm trying to do here is it's important to understand where we are in the world, our history, how things have behaved in the past, and why they happen. Like, for example, when you understand that the politician only cares about being re-elected, now you understand why he does stupid things. And because he needs to be re-elected, he needs a lot of campaign financing donations, which means he's always somehow tied to big corporations, both sides, by the way, Republicans and Democrats. They get tied up with those people because those are the ones that are putting them in power. So, and then you start to understand, why is inflation running higher? Why is the quality of life decreasing? Why is the currency losing value? Because politicians cannot resist printing money to make a crisis go away, instead of understanding that the crisis is a normal part of the business cycle. It's a part where we clean out bad companies. So the same way that you remove the weeds from your garden so your flowers can grow, same principle. If you prevent this from happening, you will not be popular. You will be popular, but you're doing long-term damage to your country. If you do allow them to go bankrupt, you will not be popular, but you'll be doing great things for your country. I mean, I think about a guy like George Washington, right? He was trying to convince people trying to convince him to be a king or to go beyond 2 terms in his presidency, and he refused. He refused the power. And I look at the politicians nowadays and I think, is there any of them who would refuse that? To understand that it's important that people come around and change. You see, the best countries in the world, to be honest, are the ones that you don't even know who rules the country. Like, you cannot even think. What is the richest country per inhabitant in the world? Luxembourg. Who runs it? Don't know. Which other country is very rich in Europe? Switzerland. Who runs it? Don't know. Who runs Finland? Don't know. Who runs Singapore? It's the same party, but who is exactly the person there? What to defend? Don't know. So there's the least you hear about the government, the better the country tends to be. So that's it, guys. That's my take on this lovely Sunday. You guys let me know in the comments if I'm a complete clown or if you actually agree with me. And I would like to thank you all, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you, guys.